Good morning, and welcome to another episode of Friendly Fire, show dedicated to libertarian candidates. Today, Cody McNutt is here to discuss his previous run for Delaware Congressional at-large seat. And then later in the show, we'll dive into a bill that's causing book banning commotion here in Jacksonville. It's going to be a great show, so let's go ahead and get to it. All right. We are here with Cody McNutt. And like I said, he ran for the congressional seat in Delaware, the at-large seat. Good morning, Cody. How are you?
Doing well. How are you doing?
Doing very well. So things have changed a little bit. The election's over. So let's dive right into it. And this is a retrospective. And the purpose of this retrospective is just to kind of talk about things and say, all right, let's talk about some of the things that went good. Let's talk about some of the things that maybe didn't go so good. And let's talk about some of the things that you just learned in general, because what I want to do is I want to motivate people who might want to run in the future to have a little bit better understanding of what to expect. Or maybe there are people who out there that that want to assist in the campaign, but they're not really sure how. So that's what these retrospectives are about. They're about hearing, like, hey, here's a pain point that I had. Maybe your pain point was that you had trouble, maintaining your scheduling because that's just not something that you do very well. So then later, somebody else might say, well, I'm really good at scheduling things. So let me see if I can't find a candidate who needs some scheduling assistance, whatever. It's these kind of things that help build us up so that as a libertarian party, when we have candidates who run, they have the proper support that they need. So give us a good overview of your campaign.
One of the first shortcomings I had is I really got started too late. By the time I went out and started talking to people, it was already like 2 months out from the election. So didn't have a lot of the traction to build up that I could
Right.
have. Another issue, like as you mentioned, the scheduling. I did most of it by myself. I didn't like employ a staff, so it was like harder to like make sure I got events, got off in time. There, I did get help with that. That's where I found most of like the events and most of the speaking opportunities to go to, but was mostly just doing it by myself. Would not recommend that. Let as many people help as they can.
Right. Do you have any, like if you had to pick one or two people that could just be your right hand person, what would they do? Or what would they
One
have
would
done?
uh, definitely if I had run a more robust campaign, we would have had more fun. So I would definitely need somebody to keep track of that. But the other person would be someone who is actively looking for like local street festivals or other opportunities where I get direct contact with the public, so I can get the schedules, get off of work, make sure I can make those.
Gotcha. And that's actually I find that to be a very important role. And we have somebody here in our affiliate. They act as our events coordinator, and their role is really just to seek out events and find events to go to, because there's a lot involved, because you have to find them, and then you have to reach out and find out, okay, can I get in? And then, okay, I can get in, but what does it take? Do I need to have a certain level of money? Do I need to, submit a form? All these different things, and sometimes that's time consuming, just to find them, and then on top of that, then to narrow them down and figure out which ones might be wise for a candidate to go to, or in our case, an affiliate to head to. But I think there's some overlap in some of the similarities that we share. So okay, so it sounds like, just trying to get the word out was the big deal for you. That was the
Yes.
biggest challenge that you had. So when we met last time, and we're not going to go over it too much, I'm just going to kind of highlight. I'm not going to pull them up on the screen here, but your website is still active, codymcnutt.com.
Cody
And you
on
had
No.
Oh, my apologies, Cody R. McNutt. And you had bring back the domestic economy, non-intervention policy, pro-choice versus pro-abortion, COVID-19 authoritarianism, and the vindication of the Second Amendment. So we'll set aside the COVID-19 because that one is kind of very specific.
Kind of, kind of moot now.
But the rest of them seem to be ones that are pretty good anytime. So
Mhm.
when you look back, are there and when you went out talking to people, did you identify any issues that maybe should have been on your platform that weren't, or were some issues did you think that they were going to resonate more and then it turned out they didn't? Like like kind of give us this.
I thought that the platforms that I had were pretty solid and universal. They were typically something that everyone would bring up that were
Mhm.
talking to me. But mostly when I was talking to people, I would make sure that they were asking me asking me the questions about things that they cared about, because I didn't want to waste someone's time sitting there talking for 10 minutes about my platform and then have that person not care about that issue. So I would make sure that they had an issue that they care about, and then I got to talk about it.
Gotcha. And so do you feel like you chose wisely for the things that you wanted on your platform in terms of a campaign, not necessarily what's important?
Oh, I think those were the big button issues for this election.
Okay. All right. And so since we're talking about the campaign and you ended up getting, let me see here, you got 1% of the vote, so 3,074 votes, and then
Mhm.
your competitors, that's so funny. Your now now that word's stuck in my head and I'm trying to find the correct word, but your opponents,
Opponents.
um, Rochester and Murphy got 55% and 43% respectively. So
Mhm.
when you look at it, that's a fairly even amount. I mean, it's not quite even, but it's pretty close. It's within 10 percentage points. Um, how do you feel your approach to running against a Republican and a Democrat went, and then what might you do differently in the future?
Um, that was actually one of my biggest things I learned from this campaign. What was it? People around me were telling me that I need to attack people and do, well, not like attack, like maliciously attack people, but be like,
Mhm.
hey, hit hard on this thing. And I was like, it's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to pretty much what I describe it as being the swellest guy campaign.
Mhm.
It didn't get the results that I wanted. They were still very good numbers. I think it was one of the best we've had for that office before,
Okay.
but it's not what I wanted.
Okay. And do you have
And
any? Go ahead.
I was actually extremely surprised by the Republican Lee Murphy's performance this time. The entire
Like,
swing vote went to him, which
oh,
is
okay.
completely abnormal.
Okay.
But
So is it more of
Democrats, I just see it's
a blue
about
state?
60% here. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So if you were to run this again with the same circumstances,
Mhm.
what would you do differently to maybe not be surprised by the polling, or I'm sorry, by the actual election numbers?
I would, well, one, as I said earlier, I would make sure I'm getting started earlier. And I would be more aggressive towards like the other candidates, not like maliciously, but saying that this is why you shouldn't vote for those people, as opposed to
Okay.
this is why you should vote for me. I would still be doing that, of course, but I would try to incorporate that a little bit more into what I was saying to people.
Gotcha. And I think that makes sense. I mean, obviously people talk about it all the time. We would like to have nicer campaigns. It's, and I think there's a little bit of historical inaccuracy when people say, it's worse now than it ever was before. Because if you go back far enough, I mean, it got pretty nasty. Um, so and I when I talked to Ricky Harrington out of Arkansas, I asked him, I said, do you think, because he's a really nice guy and it comes across like he's a really just
Mhm.
genteel kind of fellow. And I was like, are you too nice for politics? And so I guess I should ask the same thing to you, because you also present, I mean, I've never met you in person, but you present as a very cordial person. Do you think you're too nice for politics?
Um, I don't think so. I don't. I would say that this is the first time I've ever heard that.
Okay. I've never met
Yeah,
you. I mean, you could be a tough
yeah.
character in person, maybe imposing.
I would say that I'm not as malicious as other candidates might be.
Okay. Okay. And I agree. I do think that we should
Mhm.
probably not aim to be malicious,
Yeah.
just because, if nothing else, it opens the door for people to be malicious right back, and then
Mhm.
nobody has any sympathy, right? So if you're malicious to your candidate and they're malicious to you, and then you start saying, "Whoa, that was a little more than I bargained for," people are going to look and be like, "Well, maybe you shouldn't have
Oh
ran
yeah.
that one ad." Okay, awesome. So we've kind of talked about some of the things that didn't go well, and so let's talk about the things that went well. Because what I want to make sure that we do is I want to cover like some exciting things that happened to you on the campaign trail. Like, man, I was talking to this person, and at first I didn't think I was going to reach them, and then all of a sudden they were like, "Man, I'm voting for you." However that whatever stories that may be. What story can you tell us that gets people excited and say, "Man, I'm glad we're running libertarian candidates"?
Mhm. Um, really, what it came down to, the best thing that I did was talking in front of people. I would say that I've had about an 80% rate
Mhm.
success rate when I was like someone came up to talk to me, or they ended that conversation with "I'm going to vote for you." And what was like, I think, well, I know that that worked because we only had 500 registered libertarians actually vote in this election. So 2,500 were non-libertarians, and I think I might have talked to about 1,500 people,
Okay,
like personally, face to face, and I was like, that must have been where most of those votes came from.
gotcha. I think you highlight something that we don't really talk about enough. You said about 500 libertarians voted in this election, and
Mhm.
presumably you got all of their votes. It's not a guarantee, but we can presume that. And but you got 3,000 votes, which means
Yes,
you got 6 times as many votes as there are registered libertarians. 2,500 more. I think that's 6 times. I think I'm doing my math right here.
5 times.
It's a little early for me, and anybody that knows me and my family knows that my wife is the math expert. It is not me.
Mhm.
I get bested all the time, and I'm very comfortable in saying that. But at any
Mhm.
rate, I think it's something that maybe should be part of the metrics, or what do you think? And this is kind of an out of the nowhere question. Do you think that we should? Because a moment ago you said, "Hey, the 1% is not what I wanted."
Yeah,
And in fact, what was your goal?
I was stretching for five, but I
Okay.
wanted I wanted about three.
Okay. Now, does that pertain to ballot access in any way?
Only I think it's only the presidential campaign that affects ballot access.
Okay. And
However, there was no way I was going to get that, but if I got 30%, that would have been guaranteed access to uh, the university debate in the next
okay,
election.
gotcha. Okay. And just so viewers and listeners know, when we
Mhm.
talk about ballot access and percentages of the vote, in some states, when they determine future ballot access based on prior voting outcomes on the election. So there's some states maybe you might need to get like 2 to 5% in the presidential election in order to secure ballot access. Otherwise, you don't. The ballot access has to be earned a lot, and it comes with a lot of signatures and a lot of work, maybe some money. So it's very, very difficult. So just so anybody who's not familiar with that is understanding what's going on here. So, um, so you wanted about 5%, and we got about 1% of the vote, and then now we're talking that hey, there's about 500 registered libertarians that were eligible to vote for, or that did vote for you. Is that eligible or who did vote?
That's did vote.
Okay, so that did vote. So maybe that should be one of the metrics, because I think with the Libertarian Party, our candidates tend to get such low numbers that I don't know that we have a good way of identifying what a good metric is. I know a lot of people will say you should get this many percentage, um, but I think especially in areas where maybe they're starting off, or they've got kind of like a rocky history of some years they have a candidate, some years they don't have a candidate. Maybe this would be a better metric. Do you have any thoughts as to the metrics and how we might best motivate people so that people don't get too down and out about it?
I never really thought about it that way, but that sounds like it would be a good, at least one to keep track of. How many out of party votes did we get?
All right. Because in this case, if you got all the registered libertarians to vote for you, then that
Mhm.
means you got 500 registered libertarians, you got 2,500 of some other party or affiliation. And I think that's a pretty decent number to look at. It's clearly not where we want to be. Obviously, we want to win. That is the goal. I presume that it was your goal to win and to be
Mhm.
sitting up there yelling during, um, you know, president's speech or whatnot. Sorry, but okay. What are the good things? You have some good experiences on the campaign trail with some people, with some folks.
Oh, it was almost, yeah, every time I went out and was talking to people, it was a good experience. Getting to go on was it this show was one of my first opportunities to speak. That was a good time. It was good, great press to be able to have these like recordings
Mhm.
there for other people.
Is that something
And,
the
and then
Liberty
was it
community? Oh,
post
go ahead.
election? I heard from somebody who was like, "Yeah, we heard you speak at this and that," and I was like, "You sound really great, but I am a elected Republican, so you did not have my vote."
Hmm. Gotcha. Is that something that needs to improve in the Liberty community? Is maybe and I'm afraid to say this because I know what it's going to sound like, but do we need more podcasts, not just podcasts, but podcasts that are saying, "Hey, let's get the word out about candidates."
I think that would be it's great to have if there's a video for someone to watch to hear you speak. It's going to be a lot easier than being like, "Hey, I didn't get to see him at that event, and I only got to talk to him for 30 seconds. If I did,
Right.
it's never going to
Because
replace talking in person, but having that
right.
there is great."
Right. Well, I think it adds one more avenue of being able
Mhm.
to present candidates out. Because let's just assume for a moment that I have like this huge, huge platform, right? I got like hundreds of thousands of people watching. Well, then that means everybody's going to be vying to try to get on this one show, right? And if you and then it will give the presence of, if you don't get on this one show, then you don't matter. So we're kind of back to this old legacy media idea where, oh, if you didn't get on there, there must have been a reason why you didn't get on there. You must
Mhm.
not be important, because they're clearly going to put their time and effort toward the people that matter, right? Like that's the perception. Um,
Mhm.
and so I think that we need a bunch of smaller shows like this that are saying we're going to interview candidates. And the way I look at it, if I've got, let's just say I've got, you know, 10,000 people watching, I'm kind of that's my 5%, by the way. So
Yeah.
I got 10,000 people watching, and then somebody else has 10,000 people watching, and somebody else, let's say there's 5 people that got 10,000 people watching. Surely there'll be some overlap, but you're looking up close to 50,000 viewers over 5 different people, and
Mhm.
they could be in different markets, different areas, and give you different reach. So I think that, it's not that we have too many podcasts, which, I guess you could make that argument, but maybe we don't have them in the right spot.
Say I wouldn't argue that we have too many podcasts, but
I can't.
yeah.
So, all right. What else about this campaign should we talk about, or your previous campaign?
Oh, not sure. It was just I was it was much better experience than I had in 2018. Like what was it? My friend was talking to me. He was like, I didn't take you seriously because I saw like what you were doing with your campaign in 2018, and then I saw that video of you up on the stage, and I was like, oh, he's actually taking it seriously this time. Um, I would still hear from people who's like, yeah, he's got to take himself seriously. I'm like, well, I guess next time I'm going to be even more serious.
All right. So when people say that, do you have
Mhm.
a good idea of what they mean when they say you need to take it serious?
Um, it depends on who's telling me that.
Hmm.
Because when some people say it, they mean that they want me to be a Republican or a Democrat.
Okay. Okay.
Other people, what was it? I get the random people online that want to make fun of my name, and I'm like, well, I'm not going to change that. That's not going to go anywhere.
Right. I mean, yeah,
Yeah,
you can see my last name. I was in the military, so
yeah,
just gonna throw that out there. I'm sure
yeah.
that people can figure out where that went. No, because when I hear people talk about like, hey, you need to be taking this more serious, you need to be more professional. Like you said, it does mean a lot of things. I know that some people will say, hey, you need to raise a whole lot of money, and if you don't raise a whole lot of money, then you're not serious. And I'm like, well, like that's like a catch 22, right? Like, hey, you need to raise more money so that I will think of you as being serious, but I don't want to give
Mhm.
you money unless I think you're serious, right?
Yeah.
And so it kind of boxes people in. And then I know some people will say, like, well, I need every time I see you, you need to be in a tie and a suit. I don't think that's necessarily a need per se. Depends on what it is. I mean, if you're running for the presidential election, then maybe you should probably always be seen or mostly be seen in a suit and tie. But I think it really depends on the particular election and maybe even the locale. Like if you're in a more rural area and nobody else is wearing suits and ties, then it
Yeah,
would
then you
seem to be
want
out of place, right? So I think it does mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
to.
But it sounds like you said, hey, I did take it more seriously. So what kind of steps did you do? So let's talk about that. What kind of steps did you take from 2018 to 2022 to say, I'm going to take this more seriously?
Um, in 2018, it was pretty much just like, hey, I have a Facebook profile. I bought some signs, and I'm just kind of walking around and doing stuff.
Hmm.
Um, but this time, I was like, I had what was it, radio ads. I had billboards. I had, well, not in the plural, but in the singular. But and then I was actually like going to events, more than one event, talking to people in public, actually having nuanced opinions about things that are coming up.
Hmm.
I mean, in 2018, I did have like one big, big ticket bill that I was railing against, but this time I was doing on my website, I had five things instead
Hmm.
of just the one thing I was talking about.
Gotcha. And are you planning on running again in the future?
I am not going to answer that right now.
Okay, fair enough. If you did,
Yes.
how might that look the next time around? Like if you're looking back and saying, all right, from 2018 to 2022, here's where I stepped up my game. If I were to run again in the future, here's how I would step up my game.
I would if I would definitely be planning before the nomination even happened, what I'm
Mhm.
gonna do, how I'm like what like advertising stuff I'm gonna do, getting a list of events to go to, having this all set up beforehand instead of just trying to ad lib it as it goes. That would be
Gotcha.
definitely be step number one. And then once we get like an actual team together, we can discuss any further strategy like that.
Okay, gotcha. So building a team
Mhm.
and then pre-planning. And I think that's actually good. I think that we tend to forsake the idea of planning because a lot of these issues we kind of already have our mind set on where do we stand on this particular issue, right? And so I think it's natural to just say, you know what, I can answer that if somebody asks me. But I think when you're on the campaign trail, when you're actually talking, and now I'm trying to get someone to vote. Now you're not just regurgitating what you know, you're
Mhm.
actually trying to convince somebody to the point that they will They will mark you as the person that they want in office.
Mhm.
And I think that really changes the dynamic quite a bit. And so I think, and I'll give you a story where I got caught off guard. I was, so we have 3 candidates here in Jacksonville that are running for city council. There was a hobnob last year, and our
Mhm.
table, our affiliate got a table, and then 2 of the candidates got a table as well. And then the
Mhm.
3rd candidate, he chose not to get a table, but instead to come as an attendee and simply walk the room. So that was everybody's strategy.
Mhm.
And I'm generally pretty prepared to talk to people. And this one gentleman came up and he said, well, what's your position on abortion? And what I was trying to tell him was like, for the Libertarian Party, there's actually, it's kind of split. So I was like, well, in our community, I said, there are different views on abortion. And then he was like, no, there's only one view. And I was like, okay. And he was like, it's wrong, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay. So he totally caught me off guard because I wasn't expecting someone to come at me like that, where he initiated the conversation and then I responded expecting that he was going to be like, okay, that's an interesting point. I see what you're saying. Yeah, right. Like that's what I was expecting. But he had already had his mind made up, like 100%, like maybe more than 100% if that was actually possible. So, and I think that sitting down, preparing and saying, okay, what's the hot button topic right now? When
Mhm.
somebody approaches me, how am I going to talk about this? Right. And I think that's, so I think that planning is absolutely a good thing. So, is there any, and there's no chances at this particular moment for you to get on a debate stage, right? With the percentages that I assume that they've got it locked out.
No, they do like their own poll, and you have to poll at 10% with the University of Delaware poll.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So, but if you were
Or
to
have
get
one
into
of the
an,
various other qualifiers that I also don't have.
gotcha. But if you were to get on the debate stage with an opponent,
Mhm.
right? Like that's also takes a lot of planning because you're going to have to
Mhm.
figure out what kind of things that you want to ask the other candidates to try to highlight their failures or failings so
Mhm.
that people might look to you and say, well, I want to vote for this particular person.
Mhm.
So, okay. Well, I think that pretty much covers most things. Overall, did you feel good about having run back in 2022?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, that's good. And
Yeah.
then I assume that you got adequate support from your state and your affiliate parties.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. That's good because that's one area where people tend to complain and say, "Hey, we're not getting the support we need," and that's a big challenge. That's an entire show on itself.
Yeah, they were. What was it? I never wasn't really asked for any like funds for anything. I ran a pretty was it low budget campaign. I actually had exactly the amount of money that I to do exactly what I needed to do.
Okay.
But I did ask them, was like, hey, I want to do a second run of signs. I got to hit this county, and I don't have enough left. They sent me the cash for that, and they were all was it extremely happy with the results at the end.
Good. That's good. I'm glad to hear that. Well, sir, I am glad that you ran. I'm glad that you came on the show not once but twice now.
Mhm.
And who knows? Maybe we'll need to have you on again if you run for either the same position or for another role. Who knows? We'll see. Any
Yeah, we'll
final
see.
words? What do you got going on now? Now that the election is over, what do you got going on now?
Well, tried to take a news hiatus after the election after spending 10 years just watching the news like every set of downtime, but yeah, that didn't last as long. So I'm starting to get back into the more let's get more active in the party. Let's keep up with current event stuff. So that's where I'm at right now.
Gotcha. All right. Well, any final words for people out there for would-be candidates, current candidates, or just regular members who might want to support candidates?
Hey, if you're thinking about being a candidate, you don't just sit around and let the world change around you. Be the change you want to see in the world.
Awesome. Well, Cody, thank you for coming on, and we're gonna have Cody drop off, and then here in just a moment we'll be right back. We're gonna go to a commercial break real quick, and then have a bill review. So Cody, thanks for joining. And for the rest of you, stick around. We got some more stuff coming up here in just a few moments.
How's it going, everybody? This is Ronald Tracy Robinson, the City Council candidate for District 8 in Jacksonville, Florida. I'm excited about the Gold Standard Rally we're going to have February 25th at Veterans United Craft Brewery, located at 8999 Western Way, Suite 104. We're going to have former candidate for Governor of New York, Larry Sharpe, and former Senate candidate for Georgia, Chase Oliver. We're going to have fun, food, and drinks, and games to keep everybody occupied. And we're going to put our heads together at the Q&A forum to make sure we can bring free market solutions to evade government intervention in Jacksonville. Hope to see you there.
All right, welcome back, everybody. This is the bill review portion of the show, and it is something that I've done in the past, and I'm resurrecting it, bringing it right back so that we can talk about bills. Now, the way this works, I am not a lawyer. I am simply reading bills, or at least a portion of the bill, depending on whether or not the bill is very long. So if it's a 1,200-page bill, I am not reading the entire thing. However, if it's a 12-page bill, then I probably will read the whole thing, but we will not discuss every single word of the bill necessarily. I simply pull out a few things so that you can learn exactly or get an idea of what you can learn from reading bills, because I don't believe that it should take a lawyer to read a bill. I think that every single person should be able to read a bill, take a look at it, and get a good idea of what that bill will do. So today we are going to be talking about, let me pull it up on the screen here. We're going to be talking about Florida's HR 1467. Now, this bill it's already been passed. It passed last year and it was signed into law by our Governor DeSantis here in Florida. This bill deals with K-12 education. It does a number of things. The higher level overview is that it deletes a requirement for school boards to maintain a list of books on their websites. It also imposes a public notice requirement for certain meetings that are related to learning material. And then it revises requirements for selecting learning material. So basically, it primarily addresses learning material. And this is where you've probably been hearing on the news about book bans, and teachers have been on the news saying, hey, I had to pull all these books off the shelves in my classroom. Otherwise, I could be guilty of a felony. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to kind of look at this bill and kind of talk about it a little bit in the sense of what in the world is going on. Does this bill actually ban books? But before that, let's go ahead and listen to a news broadcast that kind of gives us just a little bit of an idea of what's going on right now. So let me go ahead and pull that up. All right, so we've got this. And where are you here? Go find that screen.
Books banned in Duval County. That is the name of one Jacksonville bookstore's newest display that was just put up this weekend.
Chamblin Book Mine is using the section to raise awareness about the hundreds of books banned in schools across the state of Florida. So tonight, On Your Side, Cheyenne Cole talked to managers to find out what inspired their display.
Hanging from the shelves in Chamblin Book Mine in front of the banned books display, the definition of censored. Manager Abby Bell says that's what Duval County Public Schools are doing by removing books from teachers' classrooms to review or ban.
There are a lot of kids that don't have access to libraries or are financially unable to purchase their own books. And so these things being taken away is a really big deal and something that we're very passionate about.
Chamblin Uptown manager Kari Homway says it's concerning that an overwhelming majority of the books being pulled for review are about minorities and children of color.
So when we read books, we need to have representation. A lot of kids are not readers and they don't really want to read, but if they see someone who looks like themselves, that'll make them pick up the book.
When asked about the removal of books about minority populations, Duval County Public Schools Director of Strategic Communication told First Coast News, quote, "We have a wide range of diverse titles, including books about African American history, African American literature, and African American leaders." Shamblin's display includes pamphlets with information about how to contact legislators, Duval County school officials, and board members.
Censorship in general is dangerous because people deserve the right to tell their stories. And when you're taking those stories away, you're removing pretty much their existence, and that's not okay, and that's not something that we believe in.
The displays are up at both Shamblin locations. Reporting in Jacksonville, Cheyenne Cole, First Coast News, on your side.
Now, Duval County Public Schools says the list of approved books grows every day as certified elementary and district media specialists are conducting reviews and posting new titles to the approved list.
All right. Goodness, didn't realize we had that commercial going in there. All right. So, first of all, I commend the bookstore for using their business to fight back, even though I'm not entirely in agreement with their view of what motivates children and teens to read. But what we're seeing here is a clash, in my opinion, of activists. There are those who are taking things to the classroom, that is directly to the children. And then in response, there are those who are taking it to the school board elections and state legislature. Now, I want to take a moment and I want to listen to it. We're going to play another clip here real quick. I want to listen to Governor DeSantis last year at a press conference when he signed this bill. In order to talk about this bill, because this bill is a year old, we need to kind of have a sense of what was going on at the time. So we kind of have an understanding of what it is why did this bill have any traction in the first place? So let's go ahead and play that clip really quickly here.
There is a debate in this country about what role parents have in the education of their kids. And I think in Florida, with our Parents' Bill of Rights, with the bill we're going to sign here today, other bills we're going to sign later, we believe parents not only have a role, they have a fundamental role to be involved in the education of their kids. And that's how it's going to be in the state of Florida. We reject those that say parents not only shouldn't be involved, there's some say parents don't even have a right to know what is being taught in this. That there's actually some places where you can make serious decisions for these kids and not inform the parents about it. And so that is not going to fly in the state of Florida. We are going to make sure that parents have a seat at the table and that we protect their rights, because nobody is more invested in the proper well-being of kids than the parents themselves. And the good thing is...
Okay, so that's Governor DeSantis back in 2022. I want you to hold on to his words for just a moment as we take a look at the bill Governor DeSantis signed. Now, this bill is only 13 pages long. Most of it is actually existing ordinance for context. So if you decide that you want to start reading bills, you're going to find that some of these bills, the length of them is not necessarily everything that's being changed or added to an ordinance or some sort of legislative code. What some of it is, you'll see that they'll strike out stuff and then they'll also add stuff in. And then the rest of it will just simply be what is surrounding, before, in between, and after what's being changed. So in this particular case, it's not 13 pages of necessarily new law. It's just 13 pages of this particular portion of law. And then here are the changes along the way. So let's take a look at what it says and break down this whole book banning issue. So let's see what we get here. All right, there we go. So the first thing that we need to take a look at is over on page 6 on line 48. So this bill, you can't see it because I've got the screen removed in some areas of it, but again, it's 13 pages. So we're going to skip down to page 6 and we're going to get right here to line 148. Make sure that's on the screen well enough so that everybody can see it. Perfect. Awesome. So line 148. And so what's going on here at this particular point, this is where we're starting to address the books themselves. Now, there's some other things in here that have changed, and that's not going to be the topic of today's show. We're just going to kind of focus in on this particular portion here. But it says each book made available to students through a school district library, media center, or included in a recommended or assigned school or grade level reading list must be selected by a school district employee who holds a valid educational media specialist certificate, regardless of whether the book is purchased, donated, or otherwise made available to students. Okay, so in other words, every single book that's available to a student must be reviewed before a student has access to it. And that review must come from somebody who has a quote, educational media specialist certificate. This is why we're seeing stories of teachers, many who have taught for many years, expressing concern. Imagine being a teacher of, say, I don't know, 10 years and not being permitted to identify whether a book is appropriate for the grade level that you teach. By the way, I skipped through the training video available on Florida's Department of Education website because that's the kind of host that I am. I'm not sure that I've encountered such dry material in my life. It was absolutely boring. I did happen to catch something interesting, though, as I was floating through it. Media specialists are instructed to err on the side of caution. And since there are penalties which have existed in the Florida statutes for a number of years now, let me stop on that point real quick. When you go and you hear about people that have that are afraid that they may encounter this fine or lose their job or have some sort of felony, that portion is not new. What happened is they've modified how this curriculum is to be identified, and then it's tied to pre-existing statute that has all the prohibitions and then has all the all the fines and all the punishments that go along with that prohibition. So, but you can only imagine just how much of us, how much on the side of caution that teachers may err. I mean, after all, I want you to think about this. They're not authorized. Most of them are not authorized to validate these books. And we're going to get to a book. We're going to show you a book in just a moment. And I think that's part of our problem here. The state of Florida already has staff. They have teachers and other faculty members who should be capable of reviewing most, if not all, books. Sure, some of those faculty members will receive training, but it's absurd to think that training existing staff will be sufficient to review, as the bill says, quote, each book made available to students. It's almost certain that they will need to hire people solely dedicated to accomplish this task. So much for the Republican Party being the party of small government, right? I mean, with the stroke of a pen, they increased staffing needs by, I have no idea. All right, but there's more. We're going to talk a little bit more. Again, I'm not going to go through the entirety of the bill. We're just going to look at a couple points. So let's scroll down here to page 7, or to the bottom of page 7, and we're going to read this highlighted portion that you should see on your screen. Each elementary school must publish on its website in a searchable format prescribed by the department a list of all materials maintained in the school library media center or required as part of a school or grade level reading list. Then it goes down to the next subpoint here, public participation. Publish on its website in a searchable format prescribed by the department a list of all instructional materials, including those used to provide instruction required by, and then it gives a link to where it's required in the statute. Okay, so what do we got here? In addition to someone reviewing all of these books, now they must enter each book into a website that will permit members of the public, such as parents, to search and review what books have been reviewed. Remember, a moment ago, we heard Governor DeSantis claim that parents had a fundamental role to be involved in the education of their children. I agree. Other bills may deliver on that claim. However, this bill does not. It does permit committee meetings that may review books and include parents, but it doesn't really outline any specific parental role. It just simply says, we are going to do all of this work, and then we're going to give you a searchable website where you can look through and see what's going on here, and you're allowed to participate in some of these meetings. So what this bill really does is just simply create yet another layer of bureaucracy that ultimately impacts students. Rather than raise the quality of teachers, it removes responsibility from teachers who do not have a media specialist certificate. And it saddles those who do have one with more work because now they have to review every single book. And let's be clear. I'm not opposed to teachers reviewing books. I think they should. But I believe that as we can all plainly see, this bill is the cause of books being pulled from the shelves because simply it's better to be safe than sorry. Now, you might be saying, DL, I watched videos of parents at school board meetings who were interrupted by the school board committees when they tried to read offensive books that were given to their child. And you know what? I saw those too. But those are outliers. This bill covers every single book as if there are thousands and thousands of books of questionable material that are accessible to our children. That's simply not the case. We need to address the problems. We do not need to make the outliers, the exceptions, the rule. But I want to give you an example. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a live reading of one such book that was pulled. It should take only about a minute. It's a children's book, and it will highlight the problem with this bill. There are websites that list some of the books that have been pulled. Some of these lists, maybe, I don't know where they're getting their particular, like, I'm not sure how they're identifying the books that are pulled. But remember, these are books that are pulled off the shelves, not necessarily banned. It's being called a book ban, but there's nothing in the bill that actually bans the book. All that it really does is say, hey, if you give a child a book that has objectionable material, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. And the only way for each book to be permitted to be on the shelf, it has to go through this bureaucratic nightmare of somebody reviewing it and then adding it to a website so that it can get the approval of parents, which again, I'm not opposed to parental involvement or approval. What I'm attacking here is the method for which that they're addressing a handful of books. So let's go ahead and pull that book up, and we're going to do a live reading of that. So give me just a second here. All right, where are we here? And go. And this one's called Dim Sum for Everyone. All right, so this is just the introductory page there, telling you who it's written to. All right, dim sum has many little dishes. Some dishes are on carts, little dishes on tables. I'm sorry, I misread that. Mama picks little dishes of sweet pork buns. Baba chooses little dishes of fried shrimp. Gigi, I think that's how you say it, wants turnip cakes. Honestly, that does not sound good. May May wants sweet tofu. Also doesn't sound good. I like little egg tarts. We eat a little bit of everything. Everyone eats a little bit of everything. Now there are empty little dishes. And this gives a little bit of a history of dim sum and where it came from. And the end. All right. So that was a bit silly of me. And, but you know, what I wanted to do is I wanted to read this book because this is one of the books that got pulled from the shelf. And this is one of the reasons why I have a problem with this bill. The book I just read doesn't in any way require a certificate to determine its appropriateness. It's absurd that we now have a bill that removes the ability of any teacher to make such a determination. I, as a parent, can look at that book and say that book is fine. There is nothing wrong with that book. It should have taken me 2 seconds to just flip through the pages and determine this book is just fine, put it back on the shelf, and move along. I expect anyone teaching my son, and you should as well, to be able to handle that much and then some. It's true, we don't want our 5th grade boys reading, say, I don't know, the Turner Diaries any more than we want our 5th grade girls reading 50 Shades of Grey. Teachers that are found to not be trusted to make these decisions, at worst, simply should be removed. or at best sent for remedial training. This also doesn't mean that we should necessarily add more work to teachers either. It's simply about seeking out a level of quality with teachers rather than adding laws that have more of a negative impact than a positive one. So I hope this has kind of enlightened you on what this bill does and what this bill does not do. What this bill does not do is explicitly ban books. However, what it does do is impose punishments and make the requirements for determining which books are appropriate more onerous. Therefore, it leaves teachers in a position to simply say, it's better to be safe than sorry, remove books from the shelves, and then wait for someone to come along and review each one of these books. This is absurd. There is no reason that this bill should have ever been passed in this particular form. That's all that I have. I hope you enjoyed this bill review. I want you to be sure to hit that like button and let others know about that podcast. But for now, I want you to stay safe and guard your liberty. And until